Scene script. Have you ever wondered what the world would look like if the Black Death never occurred? A fascinating thought, isn't it? The Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, was a devastating pandemic that swept across continents in the 14th century, forever altering the trajectory of human history. It's estimated that it wiped out between 75 and 200 million people, roughly a third of Europe's population at the time. But what if this catastrophic event never happened? How drastically different would our world be today? The Black Death wasn't just a health crisis, it was a social, economic, and political earthquake that shook the very foundations of medieval society. It created a labor shortage that led to significant social and economic changes, including the end of feudalism and the rise of the middle class. It also played a role in the religious upheaval that eventually led to the Protestant Reformation. Imagine for a moment a world where the Black Death is just a figment of imagination. A world where medieval society continued on its path without the disruption of the plague. What would that world look like? How would it have evolved over the centuries? In this hypothetical scenario, the feudal system could have persisted for much longer, with serfs tied to their lords' lands and the aristocracy maintaining their dominance. The labor shortage that spurred technological innovation and economic growth might not have happened, potentially delaying the Industrial Revolution. Religion, too, might have taken a different course. The Black Death shook people's faith in the church, which was unable to provide an explanation or a cure for the plague. This crisis of faith paved the way for the Protestant Reformation. Without the Black Death, would the Reformation have occurred, or would the Catholic Church have maintained its unchallenged authority? This is, of course, all speculative. History is a complex tapestry of interconnected events, and the absence of one major event like the Black Death would undoubtedly have ripple effects that are impossible to predict with certainty. Now, let us venture into a world where the Black Death is a mere figment of imagination. Imagine a world where the social hierarchy of the Middle Ages remained unaltered. The Black Death, devastating as it was, played a significant role in reshaping the social fabric of the 14th century, particularly in Europe. The sudden and drastic reduction in population led to a labor shortage, which in turn led to a shift in power dynamics. For the first time, the working class found themselves in a position of leverage, able to demand better wages and improved working conditions. But what if the Black Death had never occurred? The feudal system, a rigid structure where everyone knew their place and rarely moved beyond it, might have persisted far longer than it did. Serfs, bound to the land and their lords, would have continued their lives of hard labor with little reward. The nobility, on the other hand, would have continued to enjoy their privileges, their wealth, and their power. Without the plague's leveling effect, the divide between the rich and the poor could have been even more pronounced. Social mobility, a concept we take for granted today, might have remained a distant dream for many. The idea of a peasant becoming a merchant or a merchant's son becoming a nobleman may have been far less likely without the social upheaval caused by the Black Death. This is not to say that change would have been impossible. History is full of exceptions, of course. But the pace of change might have been slower, the opportunities fewer and farther between. The feudal system was not without its benefits, of course. It provided stability, security, a sense of belonging. But it was also a system that favored the few at the expense of the many. Without the Black Death to disrupt it, to shake it to its very foundations, who knows how long it might have persisted. In this alternative timeline, the rigid social structures of the Middle Ages might have prevailed far longer than they actually did. What if the economic landscape of the world had remained untouched by the Black Death? Imagine a world where the Black Death never struck, where the economic structure of the Middle Ages remained intact. The Black Death, known as one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, had a profound impact on the economy of the medieval world. This catastrophic event led to a drastic shift in labor markets and the collapse of the feudal system. In the 14th century, Europe's economy heavily relied on the feudal system, a hierarchical structure where peasants or serfs worked the land of their lords in exchange for protection. The Black Death, however, wiped out a significant portion of the population, creating a severe labor shortage. This labor scarcity gave the surviving workers a newfound bargaining power, leading to better wages and improved working conditions. It also led to the decline of serfdom, as peasants began to demand more rights and freedoms. Now picture a world where the Black Death never happened. Without this labor shortage, serfdom might have persisted. The labor market might not have evolved as it did, the bargaining power that the workers obtained might never have materialized, and the wage increase they enjoyed might never have occurred. Moreover, the absence of the Black Death might have prevented the rise of a money economy. The labor shortage caused by the plague resulted in a shift from a barter economy to a wage economy. If the Black Death had not occurred, the transition from feudalism to capitalism might have taken longer, or maybe it might not have happened at all. In this alternate reality, the economic structures of the Middle Ages could have remained unaltered. The world might have continued with its feudalistic economic system, a society where the lord-peasant relationship remained the norm. The Black Death, as devastating as it was, acted as a catalyst for economic change, shaking up the established order and paving the way for the rise of capitalism. Without the Black Death, the economic structures of the Middle Ages could have remained unaltered, possibly delaying the advent of capitalism. How would faith and spirituality be different in a world without the Black Death? This question transports us to a parallel timeline, one untouched by the catastrophic plague. The Black Death in our timeline was a catalyst for a profound crisis of faith. With millions perishing around them, people began to question the church and its teachings. If God was benevolent and omnipotent, how could he allow such unimaginable suffering? This dissonance between belief and reality led to a seismic shift in religious attitudes, paving the way for the Reformation. Without the Black Death, this crisis of faith might never have occurred. The church, unchallenged, could have retained its stronghold over the hearts and minds of the people. Its influence, both spiritual and political, might have remained unshaken. The masses would continue to look up to the clergy for guidance, and the church's moral and ethical teachings would continue to shape society. The Reformation, a significant religious movement that challenged the authority of the church and led to the establishment of Protestantism, might not have taken place. The likes of Martin Luther and John Calvin, known for their critique of the church, might not have found an audience receptive to their ideas. The church's monopoly on religious thought could have remained unbroken. In this alternative world, the religious landscape of Europe would look vastly different. We might still see a unified Christian church without the countless denominations we see today. The church's teachings might have continued to be the singular source of spiritual guidance, unchallenged and unaltered. Yet, we should remember that history is a complex web of cause and effect. While the Black Death undeniably shook the foundations of faith, other factors could have still led to religious upheavals. But one thing is clear, without the Black Death, the religious history of the world would have been remarkably different. In this world without the Black Death, the church could have retained its stronghold, and religious movements like the Reformation might not have taken place. The world without the Black Death is a fascinating, albeit hypothetical, scenario. We've journeyed through a different Middle Ages, one untouched by the devastating plague. Let's take a moment to revisit this alternate history. In this world, the societal structure of the Middle Ages remains largely unaltered. The feudal system, with its rigid hierarchies, continues to dominate, and serfdom persists. The labor force remains abundant, and the social mobility that the Black Death inadvertently brought about is absent. The societal upheaval and the questioning of authority catalyzed by the Black Death might not have occurred, allowing for a more stable, albeit unequal, society. The economy of this alternate timeline would also look remarkably different. Without the plague wiping out a significant portion of Europe's population, labor remains cheap and plentiful. The technological and agricultural advancements that were accelerated by the labor shortage after the Black Death may not have taken place, or at least not as rapidly. Religion, too, would likely have a different trajectory. The disillusionment and loss of faith that came with the Black Death might not have occurred, potentially leading to a stronger hold of the church over society. The Reformation might have been delayed or even prevented altogether, significantly altering the religious landscape of Europe. Now let's consider the implications of this alternate history on our current world. Without the Black Death, the course of human history would have veered in an entirely different direction. The societal, economic, and religious changes that emerged in its aftermath shaped the world as we know it. Our society, economy, and even our belief systems might have been fundamentally different. While we can only speculate about this alternate timeline, it's clear that the Black Death had profound effects on the course of human history. Its absence would have resulted in a drastically different world. reminding us of the immense impact of historical events on our lives, societies, and futures.